Welcome to the Samson Strength Coach Collective. On today's episode, we have Scott Charland. Scott is a well-known name within the field of strength and conditioning. We discussed him coming on the podcast and talking about one specific topic that we'll dive into here, which is be coaches' salaries and negotiating salaries and how to go about that process, which is, again, really important for us to talk about. And we'll dive into that during the episode. You'll hear me fangirl in the beginning about his infatuation with infatuation. I don't know if that's the correct word. I'll have to look that up after this and then be embarrassed if I got it wrong. But with Arnold Schwarzenegger, these classic bodybuilding stars of his day and age when he was first coming up, and really the same kind of methodology of lifting that I fell in love with, and what was really cool about just being a kid. I remember I was first introduced to it via Bigger, Faster, Stronger, right? Which was the documentary made by the Bell brothers. It was incredible for me to then get exposed to that world and then watch things like Pump and Iron, which anyway, I'm going off on a tangent, but it was great for me to speak with him about that era and what the transformations he's seen throughout strength and conditioning. And then again, we touched on a really, really important topic, which is salary. We all love being strength coaches. We all love working within this field, but at the end of the day, and Lou said it on the episode last week, ultimately, we do this for a salary. We do this to get paid, and it's important that we get compensated fairly. And so Scott was the one who broached or breached, again, another word I'll have to look up, this topic. And I think it was really, really valuable for the things that he mentioned to understand for coaches. And so, as always, thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy. What's going on, Samson Strength Coach Collective listeners? On today's episode, we have Scott Charland this is one of the coolest titles. I love this. Manager of Human Performance at Parkview Sports Medicine. Thank you for coming on.
No problem. My pleasure. And I want to thank you for having me on. I really enjoy your podcast. You kind of talk to a lot of younger strength coaches, kind of a generation after me. So it's been a great way for me to kind of learn who the younger up and coming strength coaches are. And again, I just want to thank you for having me on and for doing this for the profession, because not a lot of people realize how much work these things are. And, we're getting contacted the day before and setting it up and asking questions and this and that. So a lot of people probably think we just pick up the phone and start talking, but there's a lot of back end stuff that goes into this. And I thank you for doing that for our profession.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I mean, I really appreciate that. Luckily, my job's pretty easy. I just have to do the talking, and then our editor, Stephanie, and everybody else over at Samson does all the hard work. So they do a great job with it. But thank you. I'm excited to speak with you. We've gotten to speak just a little bit already. I think we're going to get into some really interesting topics, especially for the demographic you just mentioned, right? The younger strength coaches. I think this is some wisdom that you can impart upon us that's going to be really beneficial.
Yep.
But to start, can you kind of just give us your background in strength and conditioning and then what's led you to Parkview?
Absolutely. So I'm 49 years old, so I'm a good bit older than a lot of your guests. Your Coastal Carolina guy has me beat, but that's probably about it. But and so when I was a child in the 80s growing up, everything was Arnold Schwarzenegger and Sylvester Stallone and Hulk Hogan and American Gladiators, and just like muscle was everywhere. And I just loved it. I was fascinated by it and would get, the Muscle and Fitness magazine and read it front to back and back to front and just all those things. But at that time, strength and conditioning wasn't really even a profession. There was no such thing as a high school strength and conditioning coach. There was no private sector, D1 didn't exist, all those kind of things. So unless you were a big time college athlete or a professional athlete, which I was not, you really had no exposure to strength and conditioning. So I went to school, thinking like personal trainer or corporate fitness. So my first job I went to Florida State. My first job out of undergraduate was in corporate fitness. I worked for an insurance company in their on-site corporate fitness center, teaching aerobics classes and putting people on a Kaiser circuit and, just working with adult general fitness population. And I enjoyed it. Like, it was an 8 to 5 job. I was getting paid okay. And I thought, yeah, this is it. This is pretty cool. But I was lifting myself and working out hard. And it's kind of one of those light bulb or life-changing moments, but our company had a team in a beer league softball league, and I am terrible at softball, so I did my normal hit a ground ball to the shortstop, but I ran to first base, and I can distinctly remember feeling like, wow, I'm running pretty fast. And boom, I beat the throw by 3 steps to first base, and I was like, wow, I am faster than I ever remember myself being. And this is like at 25, 26 years old. And I was like, well, boy, all that lifting weights, all those deadlifts and squats and all the stuff I've been doing, there must be something to that. So it got me kind of interested in like, maybe I could do something with sports here. So I just, on a Google search, now that not even Google, World Wide Web search, just kind of banged around and somehow came across the NSCA. And in reading that, I was like, man, this is awesome. This is exactly what I want to do. I can't imagine anything better than this. So studied, passed my CSCS, been certified for 25 years now, and got a graduate assistant at the University of Alabama, Birmingham. And that's kind of where it started. So I did my GA at the University of Alabama, Birmingham, did my CSCCA internship and did that certification through the University of Alabama. Went to work. I met my wife while a GA at UAB. She was the GA volleyball coach. So she got an opportunity to be the head strength coach, our head volleyball coach at Birmingham Southern College. They've been in the news lately as the college just closed, but at the time they were transitioning from NAIA to Division I. So she was the first Division I volleyball coach at Birmingham Southern. They didn't have a strength coach. This is 2001. So I just showed up, started working with her team. Then the basketball team saw me doing that. And then the baseball team saw me doing that. And eventually, that just turned into, the head strength coach, first head strength coach at Birmingham Southern College. I got $1,000 per year per team. So I was making $12,000 and just loving it. As the head strength coach, we had a 900 square foot weight room, 2 squat racks, 2 benches, and a dumbbell rack. But it was great. I was learning and growing every day. From there, went to Ohio State. I had an opportunity to be on the Olympic strength and conditioning staff at Ohio State. Did that from 2005 to 2008. After that, got a job as the head strength and conditioning coach at St. Louis University, 2008 to 2013, and that was just heaven on earth. I loved it. Learned so much at Ohio State that then I took to St. Louis, and it was just an absolute blast. I had great graduate assistants, great interns. I just loved it. Loved St. Louis. But from there, kind of, hey, if I'm going to climb up in this profession, I need to, at St. Louis is just myself and a GA. So I kind of realized, hey, I got to manage a staff if I'm ever going to get to like a Power 5 level. So that led me to Temple and our guy Sam Whitney. But so I was the head strength coach at Temple from 2013 to 2015. All during this time, my wife was working in collegiate athletics, and she eventually got a job in Indianapolis with the NCAA. And so I kind of always had an eye on getting back to Indianapolis. And so from Temple, similar position at Butler University, they had a head strength coach for men's basketball and football, but then I kind of oversaw all the other sports. And for several reasons, which we can get into later, generally revolving pay, had this opportunity at Parkview Sports Medicine come open. So since 2018, I have been the manager of human performance at Parkview Sports Medicine. So Parkview Sports Medicine, we provide sports performance services, athletic trainers, physical therapists, sports nutritionists, and mental performance coaches for 36 area high schools in Northeast Indiana, 5 colleges and universities, and 10 youth sports clubs. So I manage a staff of 22 strength and conditioning coaches, 11 high school strength coaches, 3 college strength coaches. On top of that, we also manage 2 private sports performance training facilities. So think of like a D1 Sports or what Velocity Sports used to be. So I manage those. That's another staff of 7 members to do that. So it's really unique. I got my hands on a lot of things, the high school sector, the collegiate sector, the private sector. We own and operate these businesses that I have a bottom line that I have to meet, and revenue and contacting members and all that stuff. But as a strength and conditioning junkie, which I am, I get to do it all, and I just love it.
That's incredible. What I'm really excited to talk about, and I just want to ask about this briefly, is just what was that era like when you talk about, Arnold Schwarzenegger, guys like Lou Ferrigno? I mean, I've got Arnold hanging up here. It's funny, he's actually
Hmm.
wearing a UAB shirt
Yeah, I
in
know
this
from
specific picture.
moving. Yep, yep.
Yeah, yep.
It just was awesome. It was such a part of the culture of just the daily life, like health, fitness, all that stuff. Like skinny jeans weren't a thing. Like you wanted to be big and strong and have 18-inch arms. It was, and those kind of like what The Rock is now, where he's just like this big giant guy into health and fitness. That's what everybody was like back then. Schwarzenegger, Stallone, Van Damme, all those guys, and they set the culture, the Incredible Hulk, all those things, they set what was popular in culture. And so it was just a different time. I say before, before Sports Center was on for 6 hours a day in the morning, what was on was like body shaping and bodybuilding shows. And Lee Haney had a show and Corey Everson had a show. And it was a different time where health, fitness, muscle, it wasn't, you weren't ashamed to be like that. It was just part of popular culture, and it was awesome.
It's got to be awesome, right? Because I remember even just reading a book about like Jack LaLanne, which is way
Yeah.
before that time even, but
Hmm.
understanding the evolution of fitness. And then, I mean, it's cool for me to be able to speak with a coach who's seen that kind of progress, now
Yeah.
getting your information from magazines to then, like you said, World Wide
Right.
Web, and then progressing from there.
Well, and it's
It's
different because most coaches that, my age, you couldn't be somewhat influenced by bodybuilding. You had a bodybuilding flavor to your workouts, even though we knew, hey, that wasn't the exact same thing. We got to do cleans and we got to do sprints. But you had some kind of bodybuilding flavor because you were so heavily influenced by it in your upbringing. And you see a lot of that today with, kind of what in the 90s and 2000s when strongman was on ESPN all the time, a lot of coaches got influenced by that. Well, perfectly fine. CrossFit Games 2010 to now, a lot of coaches are you can't help but be influenced by that. You do it, you see it, and just to see how it's bodybuilding, strongman, how that's all kind of permeated into strength and conditioning through the different ages and decades is really unique.
Well, it's so funny. I've never made that link, right? I've never seen that myself because I didn't think about it. But ultimately, I felt more towards the bodybuilding side. That's why it's so exciting for me to talk about this piece because my first book was Arnold's Encyclopedia of Bodybuilding. I had no clue that all these guys were taking PEDs. I thought I could do these workouts and I'd be totally
Yeah.
fine. But now I'm never going to get rid of muscle beats, right? In our workouts, there's always going
Uh-huh.
to be those bodybuilding aspects. But then you talk about strongman, somebody like Nick O'Brien, who was a guest on here before over in North Florida who incorporates a lot of
Hmm.
that. He's right in that age frame you talked about. And then every coach who's kind of my age, is really around that CrossFit type of area. What are
Yeah.
some of the biggest changes you've seen in the field from the time you first started to now?
Well, those are some of them, and the other, the big change is simply the explosion of strength and conditioning jobs. Well, when I was coming up, um, late '90s, early 2000s, like you'd go to the NSCA job board and there'd be a couple personal training jobs. There might be one strength job, but it was kind of like, I don't know. And you go to the NCAA website and there'd be like three jobs. Boy, there are so many jobs open right now, and high school, which was never a thing, private sector, which was never a thing, tactical, which was never a thing, basketball only, like yourself, was never a thing. You might have had, even if you're at the Power Five level, when I was at Ohio State, we had 8 total strength coaches there, and that was a lot. 3 for football, 5 on the Olympic side, and that was a lot. Now, your guest a couple of weeks ago said they had 18 or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, just multiply that across every college, let alone Division II, Division III, NAIA. There are just so many more opportunities available now than there were in the past. And again, as somebody that hires a lot of people. I have 22 staff working for me. Over the last 3 years with attrition and those kind of things, I've hired over 30 strength and conditioning coaches. It's such a, it is an employee's market. It's not an employer's market. Back in the day, hey, if someone was going to pay you $25,000 to work 50 hours a week, take it or leave it, because I got 6 other guys waiting to do it. That's not the case anymore. The employee has all the power these days. So that just explosion of new jobs is the biggest difference in the profession I've seen. Other than that, the technology that's available today, 2000, when we were at Ohio State, we could have spent money on everything. Like, we had money to burn, but there was no Catapult or even Tendo at that time. I didn't get Tendo until St. Louis 2008. So those things, all that team builder, all the online stuff, like that just wasn't motion capture stuff. That just wasn't even a thing back in the day. And how that has exploded to where you have, sports scientists on staff. Again, there's a whole nother career field that we never had back in the day. So the technology, and monitoring the athletes and all those things just wasn't, how we monitored the athlete was, hey, how you doing today? Those kind of things. That's how we monitored you. And then lastly, and the biggest change is, I think, how specialized strength and conditioning has gotten. And I'm not sure this is one I care about, care for. But you're, the basketball only guy, the football only staff. When I was at UAB, football worked out with everybody else. Now, in the Division I level, boy, you'd be hard pressed to find a football team that works out with any other sport. And I think you lose something there. Like, to me, the strength and conditioning department is the heart and soul of the athletic department. It's the one area where all the student athletes come together. They don't all go to study hall at the same time. They don't all go to the games at the same time. They don't all hang out at the same dorm rooms or cafeterias. Strength and conditioning used to be the melting pot of the athletic department. And it was so neat, because now you're seeing the basketball team working out, so you want to go to that game. And they're seeing the women's soccer team work out, and damn, those girls get after it. I want to see them play. I think we've lost that in the profession. Specializing has created more jobs. Basketball only job, baseball only job, the 5 football, like, it's created more jobs. So there's been some good things about it, but I think we've lost that, hey, we're just all getting in here and getting after it and having fun and getting together, and hey, we're all doing this for the university. And so I think we've lost some of that, and that those days, that was fun. Like, just getting after it, getting together, working with all the teams. I always, I'd go to the conferences and, oh, what teams do you work with? Man, I work with them all. Like, why wouldn't you want to work with them all? Like, we're just having fun and getting after it. And so that specialization, while it's created more jobs, it's hard to feel like we haven't lost a little something there.
Well, it's so funny you bring that up, because I was speaking with our volleyball coach here who played at Kentucky. She talked about when she was playing, over the summer, and it started to get kind of that specialization time. But, this was right in the summer where there was still kind of that untouched, everybody was going to train together at the same time. And it's so interesting, because she was talking about how it really created a sense of community, like you talked about within the sports, but then it really didn't create this. There's less of a divide amongst the teams. I know here, like, they'll talk a million times about what workouts do you do. Like, I know the volleyball, they'll date our basketball players, and then they'll talk amongst each other and be like, well, our workouts are harder. Why do you guys do this? And it's because our coaches have, our strength coaches have different philosophies. So it's really interesting that you bring that point up, because ultimately what I think is the fun part of college athletics is watching, when the football team shows up to the basketball games, or basketball goes to the tennis matches. Like, those are fun, and it creates the energy for the match or whatever it is.
Well, yeah, and we would say at St. Louis, hey, we're all Billikens, or we're all, Owls. We're all on the same team. But if we intentionally keep everybody separate, because golf can't be in the weight room at the same time as soccer. I mean, what are we doing here? I feel like the profession has lost some of that. Now, you have that at the high school setting for sure, with everybody in there together. But as an Olympic sports guy, like I always did the Olympic sports side, but I mean, we lifted. Like I was a lifter and we got after it with the kids. And so when football would say, oh, we can't, volleyball can't lift with us, I'd be like, baloney. We'll show you guys what it really looks like to work out. Or same thing with soccer or anything. So I kind of took offense to that. And it's like, why are we trying to be in these silos? Let's all get together and just get after it and encourage one another. And you tell me with a couple volleyball players in the weight room, a couple football guys aren't going to put a few more pounds on the bar, and vice versa. I mean, it's for sure going to happen. So I think that's been lost, and that's a shame. And I don't know that it's coming back, but it is what it is. Again, when like St. Louis, I had 16 teams by myself, and you couldn't quite do as much with any particular team. So when a coach has only 2 or 3 teams, the level of service obviously can be a little bit higher. So that's good, but again, there has been a little lost.
Well, I never talk about programming on the show, and we don't even have to get into it like that. But when we talk about what that has done, I look at some stuff that people will post on Instagram, and it's these basketball specific lifts, and I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
what are we even doing here? Like, this has devolved into now really blurring the lines of what's the court and then what's going to be done in the weight room. And it's exactly like you said. I just like guys that train hard, and I like teams that
Yeah.
train hard because there's something to be said about having a general program that's going to get you better.
100%. And so I played soccer in high school. I was not much of a soccer player, but that's the sport I played. So every school I went, with the exception of Temple, we won a conference championship in soccer. And at Temple, that was the coaching staff of the year. They were picked like last and finished third or whatever. So I've had a lot of success in soccer because I trained the soccer players like the football team. Like we're going to back squat, we're going to clean, we're going to deadlift, we're going to bench. And when I hear other, soccer specific and we got to do this, and we're like, man, we're just getting after it. And when my team that just absolutely gets after it plays your team that's doing all this prehab and corrective, we're just going to crush you. And I can say that with confidence because I did it at 5 different schools where I won a conference championship in soccer. We trained more like a football team than what you think a soccer team would train like, and we just beat the hell out of the other teams.
Well, it's so funny you talk about Temple because I was there. My first year at Temple was 2014, and so I
Okay, right
remember I
after.
remember
Yeah,
seeing
okay.
the
Or
soccer
right before.
players,
Yeah.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
remember they were kind of posting their lifts, and this is before I knew about specialization, and I was
Mm-hmm.
like seeing like, okay, well, these guys still do things, like squatting, benching, deadlifting, all the important pieces,
Mm-hmm.
So it's funny because I
Yep.
probably was a fan of your work before I even knew who you were.
Right. And I think that, again, that just came from everybody being in the same room together.
Mhm.
Like you couldn't, if men's soccer, let's say at Temple, if men's soccer and volleyball and golf were in this weight room at the same time, like you couldn't have 3 different things going on. Hey, we're all going to start doing cleans. Then we're all going to go squat. Then we're all going to go press, and we're all going to go row. And that's it. And, we did it with fencing. Our fencers, I'd have done the fencing workout and got stronger, so we didn't pull any punches because, well, they're girls or they're an Olympic sport or they're a soccer player. No, like we just got after it. And, when we played teams that didn't, you could tell.
Yep, and then you had a great lift, then you go get a cheesesteak. I do have to ask you this: where was your favorite spot in Philly?
Well, again, my guy Sam Whitney was kind of my tour guide to Philadelphia. So right at the kind of by the Liacouras Center there, and I forget the name of the place, but you go down the stairs a little bit. We would go there and have they'd get it chicken in a pan, I think is what it was called.
Yeah.
But it was all that. But I tell you where we would go at Temple, it was great. We'd go to like the on campus. Like the alumni center or something like that. They'd have a buffet lunch there every day. And so I'd take Sam and then Claire, who's at Ohio State now, and we'd go there and have lunch once a month and roll out of that place and go home and take a nap and then try and come back for the afternoon groups.
Well, Temple, people don't know this. That's the most densely populated food truck campus
There's
in
a
the
lot of food
U.S.
trucks there.
Oh, it's
Yeah.
fantastic food trucks, yeah. And then
Yeah.
everybody loves Richie's. That's always the big one. But
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
one thing, and I do want to make sure we save time to talk about this because I'm just having fun talking with
Yeah.
everything about it. But we talked about this pre-show, and you mentioned it briefly. Was you talked about the transition from going from Butler to Parkview, and it was related to pay, and it was related to
Hmm.
kind of the field of strength and conditioning. Is it's an interesting field. when you talk about how you negotiate salary and how you look at these differences. Can you kind of dive into what that process looked like for you
Yeah.
deciding to make that transition, and then what your kind of thoughts are on it now?
Yeah. So, St. Louis, and I think, one of the best things we can do for this profession is share what we all earn. If people don't know what other people make, that only helps our employers. That just gives them all the cards because we just don't know. So, in all honesty, so at St. Louis University, I made $55,000 a year, but that's 2008. So that adjusted for inflation, that was a pretty good salary. Went to Temple, made 65. And a phone, and so there were some ancillary benefits there. And same thing, kind of I was kind of just hitting the ceiling of like, hey, 65, 68, as the director of Olympic sports, and just didn't see anything that was like, well, when am I going to start making legitimate money? And so this position at Parkview, God bless them, they posted the salary on the NSCA website, and they were going to pay 65 to 79. And I was like, well, 79 breaks through that ceiling pretty well. And so I applied and got offered that position. And then here's where negotiation comes into play. They always give you a number and you have to negotiate. Every coach, you telling me the basketball coach, they just take their first offer? App State gave the basketball coach a salary and he said, yep, I'll take it. Like, no
No,
way.
no.
The administration expects coaches to counter offer. And the key, Connor, is, and I think you might be finding out a little bit yourself, you got to do that early. So think when you're buying a car. You don't go and buy a car, take the dealership's first offer, and then come back a year later and say,
Mm,
I'd like to renegotiate this a little bit. Can I pay a little less?
mm.
Are you out of your mind? No, this is what you're making. So you got to go hard early because it's really hard to negotiate later. So, just a couple things. When you get offered the position, so they do a national search for a position and they interview and it takes time and they're flying people in and it's costing them money. When you get offered the position, you now have all the power. They want to hire you.
Mm.
Think of who's hiring these positions. It's an old washed up coach or it's an administrator. Like, they don't want to reopen the strength and conditioning search and talk to three more of these crazy guys and bring them in on interviews and take them to lunch. Like, interviewing is a pain in the ass. I love interviewing strength coaches because I'm a strength coach, just like you. It's just a chance for me to meet more people. So I'll interview strength coaches all day long because I love it. But they don't want to do that. That's like the last thing they want to do is interview more strength coaches. So once they offer you the job, you have all the power. All right, now it's time for you to negotiate. And I will say, in every situation, they got 5 to 10% more. When I was at St. Louis, they offered me 50 or 52. I forget what it was. I countered with 55 and I got it. Temple, same thing, 60, 62. We got 65 and a phone. Parkview, again, it was like 72 and I negotiated up to the 79. You got to do a great job of where you're at and you got to, have a reason why you're asking that. But when they offer you the job, you're the person. They don't want to give it to you're number one. Like, they want to get their number one candidate. And they're not going to reopen the search or go down to number two over $5,000. Like, they're just not. So ask for it, but you can't be afraid to ask for it. And fight for yourself. Like, don't be afraid to do that. I'm just checking my notes, but you have the power. Once offered the position, you have the power. Don't, again, like buying a car, buying a house, you don't just take the first offer somebody gives you. Like, that'd be insane. The administration expects you to negotiate because every other coach on campus negotiates. Every other coach on campus is going to negotiate, but the strength coach isn't going to. Of course they are. And you're not going to ask for double the salary or 50% more. But again, there's always 5 to 10% more that you can squeeze out of them. And so I'll say this at St. Louis. So I went from 50 to 55 because I negotiated that. In 5.5 years there, I got one 2.5% raise. So, and did great by any metrics. Teams were successful. Athletes were healthy. Kids were getting stronger, faster. Participation was up. Like any metric you wanted to measure it by, we were successful. Well, so I started at 55 in 2008. In 2013, I was at 57. But because I negotiated that $5,000 a year every year for those 5 years, I ended up making $25,000 more there. But that would have never happened if I didn't ask for it. And that's a tough conversation. Like as strength coaches, we're very service orientated. Yes, we'll help you out. Yeah, we want to do this, but you have to kind of put your big boy or girl pants on at that moment and say, "That's great. I'm excited to start for this university. I want to be part of this. I'm super excited. I need a little bit more than that to make this happen," and put it in their court and see what they say. If they say no, like, nope, we're either going on to the next person, well, then take it. If it's that important, if you want to do it, take it. But I am going to tell you 9 times out of 10, and every time in my instance, they gave it to you.
Well, it's so interesting because I talked with last week. We had Lou Porciazzo on. He was talking about his first position he gets offered.
Yeah.
He was like, "Yeah, I want it immediately, right?" And
Mm-hmm.
I remember my first phone call when I got called from Texas Tech. It was like, "Yep, 1,000%." Like they ask you right then and there, especially when they know it's your first full time job. And then I even just had another person, former intern of mine, accept a job immediately, right? And it's like
Mm-hmm.
I feel like that first job is the one you never want to negotiate, and so we
Yeah,
do.
I
Oh,
would
I just
agree
want
with
to
you
ask,
there.
is that okay? Was that okay or
Yeah.
what?
So when
Okay.
I was an assistant, I didn't negotiate my salary when I was assistant at Ohio State.
Yeah.
Hey, that's what you're going to pay me. I'm trusting that you're paying me what you can pay me. I'll take it.
Okay.
Again, as an assistant, I'm not going to negotiate the salary as the assistant. But when you get to a leadership position or a head position, that's when it's time to do it. I will also say it's so valuable that what similar positions are making. You should know what other basketball only strength coaches in the Sun Belt make. I should know what other managers of performance for healthcare systems make. You telling me the head guy at football at Michigan doesn't know what the head guy at Ohio State make? Like that gives you negotiating power if you can say, "Hey, I'm coming into this job. Well, in your conference, here's what kind of the going rate is. Boy, you guys are $7,000 low on that. I'm going to need to get up into that and kind of educate them. And we talked about this the other day. The CSCCA has a really nice salary survey out from 2003 where there's some really good information on. The NSCA has one from 2002 that has some really nice ranges on. But again, this is where if we don't know what other people are making, it's hard to negotiate. Again, when you go to buy a car and you go, you want to buy a Camaro. Well, the Mustang down the street's $5,000 less. Anything you can do for the price? Oh yeah, we'll match that. But that's how. But you knew what your competitor. You know what the competitor car costs. So if we know those things, it only gives us negotiating power and it only raises up the field. When we don't share when we don't share what we make, we're kind of just negotiating in the dark. And that's really hard. So it's hard to talk about money. It's personal. It's, there's egos attached to it and all those things. But reach out to your closest friends in the profession and say, I love you. I think this would really help me out. Can you tell me what you make? Get some of that information. Have those, it's not just, hey, what's your squat program? Like, that's great. Or how many days a week do you do cleans? That's all great. But when we can start having those conversations around salary and negotiations and retirement, that's when we pick up the entire field as a whole. And the last thing on this, when you're negotiating, I look at the strength and conditioning job boards. I have the best job in the world. I'm not going to leave my job unless Parkview closes. But I look at the job boards every week just to see what people are making. Hey, what's that salary? What's this? I tweeted out a bunch of job opportunities this morning that I thought were really cool for somebody to take. And I always go back to this one. This past winter, LSU had a job, women's soccer only, $75,000. Well, now there's concrete information. If you're an Olympic, if you're a Power Five Olympic sport strength and conditioning coach, that's legitimate ammunition for when you need to go negotiate. Hey, here's the going rate. So you look at those job boards, not because you're looking for another job, but hey, what are people making? And then that just gives you ammunition in the negotiating process. Again, if you go sit down with your assistant athletic director or whoever and say, "Hey, I want a $7,000 raise," but why?
Yeah.
Because I just do. I should get one. Okay. Uh, we'll think about it, but if you have, well, here's what the other people are making. Here's a similar job. Here's the results we've had. Here's this is what coach is saying. He'd hate to lose it. You have to bring some ammunition. But again, it's harder to do on the back end. Negotiate as absolutely much as possible on the front end. That's kind of the time for it. It's much harder on the back end to get it.
I love that advice. And, I want to give a concrete example of what you just mentioned. And this was a Sunbelt salary pool for basketball strength coaches put together by one of the basketball strength coaches. And last year, he asked everybody to fill in exactly what their salaries are. I know it changed what he was able to make because he was able to go to his administration and say, hey, specifically, I'm like, 13th or whatever in the Sunbelt. And this is, if we're talking about being number one, this is how it looks. But what's been interesting too is I noticed that same salary pool generated a much higher asking price for a new strength coach at another school within the Sun Belt. All of a sudden, that salary, which was maybe 50,000 at the time, is now they're offering 80,000 in that specific school in the Sun Belt. And so that jumped up way up, But then, like you said, it only helps us because then I can go back and say, okay, maybe last year I was number 2 in the Sun Belt. But then if we look at the new rankings, I'm now dropped down to 5th or 6th or whatever it is. And if you want to keep the number one resources, then I should match exactly where we were previously. It not only helped that specific person, but it's helping the entire conference to be able to build their salaries.
Yes. Just like we share information about programming and this and that to help each other, share that information, share that. And that's real money, 50 to 80. Like that's
Incredible.
life-changing money. And the more we can talk about those subjects, the more we can get that information, not just like, well, hey, here's how many times Coastal Carolina works out per week. Like that's great to have. And they strength coach, they train on the road. Like perfect, great. Hey, what do they make? What does this person make? What does that person make? So that you can take legitimate numbers, not a feeling. Well, I feel like I make too little. You can take actual concrete numbers to your administrator. Say, here's what it is. We got to keep up. And that's, again, to your point, it raises the whole profession.
Yeah, it's been a lesson I've had to learn, right? My first couple of years was just figuring out how to survive. And then after that, it was, okay, how do we develop the program a little bit? And then now in this new phase, it's been understanding when I ask for something to administrators, you can't just go in and you just say, hey, like you said, I feel like this should be good or this would be helpful. You have to have numbers. You have to have concrete, solid
Yeah.
information. If you ask for a technology, why is this going to benefit us? And is the cost actually going to be enough for us to do this?
Mm-hmm.
And so why not take the exact same concept for a raise?
Yeah.
But you need the info to do that.
You do, and it's also why a relationship with your sport coaches
Mm.
is so vitally important. Because at the end of the day, the sport coach talking to the administrator on your behalf and advocating for you will be much more powerful than you doing it yourself. Hey, we can't lose Connor. We got to keep him. What's it going to take to keep him? Or Coach Scott? We can't. He does a great job with us. What do we got to do to keep him? The sport coach advocating for you is so important. And again, that's why the relationship with your sport coaches, boy, that you got to nurture that relationship and do everything you can to make sure that's good.
I've certainly seen that make a difference within my field, and just my own personal experiences. It makes a massive difference. Now, you talk about the front end, right? And that's going to be the most important time for you to negotiate. But what about negotiating on more of the back end or where you're at currently if you've been there for 2, 3 years? Do you have any advice on those situations?
I do. And you have to, no one's going to just like give you a raise. Hey, Connor, we're just going to give you a raise. Like, that's just not how the real world works. So, first and foremost, you got to ask. You should, as a head strength coach or something, you should have, you know, yearly at the least, but a quarterly meeting with your administrator, 2 times, whatever it is, but you should have a regular meeting scheduled with your administrator and say, hey, here's what we're doing. Here's the numbers. Coaches love it. Student athletes love it. Nothing but good things to say. You got to do a great job. Like, first and foremost, you got to do a great job. Here's all our testing results. Teams are winning. Whatever metric you want, injuries are down. But if you don't ask, I guarantee you'll never get it. So you got to ask and then see what they say. And if you can kind of read the tea leaves, if it ain't going to happen, you got to go. Like, you have got to be willing to leave. One of the things for me at St. Louis, and it wasn't necessarily a pay raise, but our baseball team, this was 2013, our baseball team had just won the Atlantic 10 championship. We're at the, local restaurant with the, the bracket reveal or whatever, the selection Sunday kind of thing to see where we're going to play in the NCAA tournament. And then, we're going to play at the University of South Carolina. And I'm sitting at the table with the athletic director and the senior women's administrator, like my 2 bosses. Yeah, we made, we're going to South Carolina, whatever. So excited. Hey, we got to get the travel party together. Who's going to all get on the plane? Hey, and I said their names, Joe and Susie. Hey, can I get on the travel party? I'd love to do that. I've worked with these guys for 4 years. These are my guys. Like, we get in the weight room, we just get after it. Now's not the right time to ask that question. There'll be a time to ask that question, but this is not the right time to ask that question. Mm-hmm. That was in May. I was gone in July.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. Like, you guys, you don't. So I drove God knows how many hours to South Carolina, almost fell asleep and crashed my car 10 different times on the road and then had to drive back. Like, if you don't value me enough to just get me a seat on the plane, it's just not for me anymore. So I got to go, and you'll find those situations. Like, if you ask and they put you off and they ask and they put you off, then it's like, I got to go. But again, remember, it's an employee's market. There's, I like I said, I texted or tweeted out, 3 jobs this morning, not one that pays less than $65,000 in strength and conditioning. There's something else out there, and don't be so tied that you have to be in college strength and conditioning. When I was coming up, that was the only place to make money, was college strength and conditioning. That isn't the case anymore. The 3 jobs I posted this morning, one was in tactical, making 80. One was private sector, making 65. And the other one was just soccer only, was a performance academy for soccer, making 70. It doesn't have to. Don't be so proud to have the logo on your shirt that you spite yourself to make, $15,000 less. Nobody cares, and it's not worth it. I kind of did that myself. My whole being revolved around being a strength and conditioning coach, but I'm in the private sector now. I make way more money than I ever did before. I have a better quality of life, work less hours, have less nonsense to deal with. It freed me. So ask for it. But again, if they're not going to give it to you, you got to go.
Yeah. And I think that's a great point. And just to what you spoke about earlier about seeing all the professions occur and the boom of, different sectors and where you can go, there's options now, exactly like you mentioned. And so
100%.
if you're not valued, why would you want to stay? Because ultimately it's not going to be good for you. And I love it here, and so it would, for my situation, it works great for me. But ultimately I see a lot of people kind of try to shove a square peg in a round hole and then just get upset and get frustrated. And what I think, number one, is, what does your significant other think about this? Because you're coming home frustrated every single day. Like, what's the quality of life that you have outside of this job?
Yeah, this is no way to live. And so I always say this, if you have a bachelor's degree in a CSCS, you shouldn't make a penny less than $50,000 a year.
Hmm.
There's plenty of jobs. Now, if you just have to be a college strength coach, then that's your fault for making that, making that low money. If you just got to be a college strength coach working 8 teams and making $40,000, master's degree in a CSCS, you're kind of making your bed, so you go sleep in it. But
Yeah.
you need to expand your horizons and get what you're worth. If you're a head guy or girl at a Division I, you should make 75 for sure.
Yeah.
And if you're not, you're only really staying in that position for your ego, not your family, not your bank account. Certainly, you're just doing that so you can go to the conference and say you're the head person at blah university. Um, those stand 50,000 and 75. If you're making less than that, go get out, do something else. Do it in another avenue. We move around all the time. Like, you gotta go. If your university isn't going to value any more than that, go. It's an employees. It's your market. We finally, the strength coach finally has the power, not the university. So get out and go make your money, man. It's amazing how much easier it makes your life when you start making some legitimate money.
It's funny you bring up the conference because I noticed it myself even this year going. Uh, 362 days out of the year, all I care about is being the best partner and, having a good quality of life and being, in line with my values and my family. 3 days out of the year when I'm at the conference, I really care about what my title is and exactly where I'm at.
Right.
It's just funny you bring it up because it just
Mhm.
shows exactly what you just mentioned. Like, ultimately what matters the most to you, and what quality of life do you want to lead?
Yeah. Again, I mean, would you rather be an assistant at an assistant strength coach in college making 45, or would you rather be a head high school person making 60?
Yeah.
If you'd rather make 45 at the college, I can't help you. God bless you. Like, we need those people, but don't complain when you're eating ramen noodles, or don't complain when you drive a beat up car. Or don't complain when you can never take vacation. You're choosing that situation because you feel you have to be a college strength coach. I felt I had to be a college strength coach, but when I got out of it, private sector, it's better. Like, it's
Yeah.
better. And I love college strength conditioning. Like, I do. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. But look at your horizon. See what else is out there. You'd be surprised.
Wow. Well, Scott, thank you, man. I really appreciate you sharing your knowledge with me and our listeners as well. Like you said, I do think we have a younger listening base, so I think it's
Hmm.
something that was needed to be heard.
Yeah.
And I think we talked about it. I mentioned with you on the phone briefly. They just had a new CSCCA salary survey, but ultimately they brought up almost one of the same things that you brought up, which was, now it's if you have a master's degree in a CSCS, that's
Yeah.
pretty much what the base requirements are, and then we're looking at that compared to others who have masters and what our numbers are at. So it's a conversation that needs to be had, and I really appreciate you being willing to share your expertise.
Yeah. And you look at that salary survey, it's kind of there's a lot between 50 and 60. And that's good to see. I think it's trending in the right direction.
Yeah,
I really do. I think it's trending in the right direction. But at the end of the day, it's just like, if you don't ask, it's not going to happen.
yeah. Wow. Well, thank you, Scott. I really appreciate it. If somebody wants to follow you on Twitter and see your job postings or Instagram potentially,
Yeah, absolutely. So 20 Rep Scott on Twitter, and I think it's just Scott Charland on Instagram. Again, coaches my age, we were all on Twitter. Coaches your age, you're all on Instagram. So I'm
yeah,
kind of I'm like in the divide. So I try and spend more time on Instagram to look at my future candidate pool and do some stuff on there. But then also PSM Performance on Instagram to see what we're doing. And I'd love for you to reach out. I have a lot of experience in the profession. I don't really coach student athletes anymore. I don't really help, student athletes achieve their goals anymore. I want to help coaches achieve their goals. So, if you have a question about salary or negotiation or what this position should pay, I'd love for you to reach out. I will spend all the time in the world talking to you. I'm a strength coach at heart. I want to give everything I can back to the profession, and would be happy to if anybody reached out and wanted some advice.
yeah. Well, I mean, I can endorse that. I think you absolutely should, and I just think it can only help the profession what you're doing. So it's greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you for what you do as well.
Absolutely.
Have a good day.
You too.